Greetings, nerds. This is SNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. That was like the worst I'm doing well ever.
Yeah, well, the mantra for the week has been do the best that we can. So
That's your mantra for the week. My mantra is stay away. Stay away.
Yay, we're doing our social distancing here, literally.
Literally. Yeah. Everything is freaking delayed.
Yeah, that's all you need to say.
Everything is delayed, which who knows how long we can sustain on talking about shows and TV in this genre, considering everything's delayed.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can do some.
Production is stopped. That's another thing. It's not just delayed. It's that on most shows, production has just stopped. So I can only imagine what episode they were in the middle of shooting or just getting prepared to start shooting, and how that's going to transpire in some incomplete storylines or something.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I think some shows were able to, like at least with the Arrowverse, were able to finish the show that they were in the process of filming, but we're already seeing adjustments in schedules and air dates, and movies like going from getting moved up early as far as on demand and streaming service release, like Rise of Skywalker was moved up. I thought something I never thought I would see actually happen. The Mouse gave in and pushed back Milan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just as we were talking in the pre-show, it's just a new world that we're in.
Yeah, a new world, and Stephen Amell is like, the joke's on you, CW. I got out while I could.
Yeah, really. I'm done. I haven't had a chance. I was hoping to watch the interview. Well, I guess not interview, but the Instagram live that he did, and because I saw the comments that I'm done, and I've had it, and he said, in some of the clips I saw where he said it with a smile and stuff, and I really wish I haven't had a chance to see the actual footage, to see his mannerisms and stuff, but I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, I can see how he's been the captain, standard bearer for the flagship show, for at least the kickoff show for the Arrowverse, and just being, as we've talked about from his Inside of You interview with Michael Rosenbaum a few weeks ago, how you could tell in that first interview how burnt out he was. And so I can see how he's ready to move forward. But on the other hand, you be thankful for what you have. And, many actors struggle to even just make it for half a season, let alone 8. So I don't know. It's kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I read it.
I think, and that's why it's being talked about. I mean, besides everyone's bored, he's still a predominant figure in that world, and his fans. I mean, I think a lot of us, majority of the reason why you stayed watching Arrow is because you wanted to support Stephen Amell. And there was something about him, his presence on social media, his hacktivism, where you felt like the line blurred a lot between Oliver Queen and Stephen Amell. So now my opinion is, hey, I listened to that Michael Rosenbaum interview multiple times. I am not surprised by these comments. I will also not be surprised if somebody by the name of Grant Gustin gives a call next year and says, hey, we're about to end The Flash. You want to do a guest experience? Okay. I mean, that's what they did with Emily Bett Rickards. She was like, I'm done. And then it's like, well, you can do a guest spot. Also, I think Steven is also very driven on working. And with his new show, for all I know, has stopped production in light of everything. And he might find himself without a job in a year or so, where suddenly it's like, yeah, I could do some guest spots on some of these shows.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, and that's why I said I had mixed feelings about it, because there was closure with Oliver, and so if you bring him back, it has to be for the right reasons. And so from that standpoint, and from a storytelling standpoint, I could see where if I didn't listen to that interview with Michael Rosenbaum, then I probably wouldn't be feeling the way that it definitely would have changed my perception of the comments, I think, because
Right.
I could just look at it from a standpoint of like, okay, I'm done. Totally get it, Stephen. You have carried this thing for 8 years, so totally get it. Looking for something new, creative energies, outlet for your career. Totally get that. But having listened to the interview and just both the meltdown as well as when he came back, it's still again, I think it just doesn't look as, it's a bad look, especially when you consider Brandon Routh's situation being written out of a show with Legends of Tomorrow, and how that was handled. It seems like it was handled pretty badly from what I gathered. I guess he was in Vancouver, and the showrunners and stuff called up from Los Angeles and said, "Hey, we're writing you and your wife out of the show." And and I did get a chance to listen to his interview with on Inside of You, and how taken aback he was from that, and he was rightfully hurt because of his time with the show, and also given that he started on Arrow and has invested so much time and relocated his family to Vancouver, and wasn't able to leave on his own terms.
Yeah, and I see that's where it's hard for me to compare the two. And I don't think that Brandon's interview makes Stephen look bad, especially in this instance, because it actually makes him look better and makes his comments about "I'm done" sound a lot better, because clearly CW doesn't know how to treat its leading men.
Yeah.
Women, for that matter. And I think that that's part of the reason why it just got to a point where Stephen's like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm tired of being mistreated. He gave those stories about what it was like to shoot his final scenes. There were problems there, and he, quote unquote, left on his own terms. So I think that I listened to a majority of the interview with Brandon Routh. I have my own opinions about just him in general, so I'm also not hard. But if you've seen the 2-minute clip where it's referenced, that's about it. I didn't really hear him to go into too much detail about the exact logistics, and I don't think he was also wanting to put all of that out there, because it's still kind of a broken family. But I mean, it's really hard, because we all know that sometimes these shows, there are no stakes. You have to let characters go. You have to let characters get to a point where there's nothing more they can do other than pass the torch. So although I understand in terms of, this is my livelihood, this has been my life for 5 years, my family for 5 years, I didn't see this coming. I get that. But a lot of us who just work in the regular business world, when we're laid off or let go, it's the same exact thing. It's just like, what do you mean? So I don't know. It's interesting, and I'm glad to hear stories like this. So I think it makes these actors more human.
It does, and I'm glad. If you have, we've mentioned it before, even though Rosenbaum, even though he's will spend a lot of his show talking about himself.
Mm-hmm.
and I feel sometimes like he has these guests on to like help him work through his own issues and stuff. But he really does bring a lot out of his guests. And I would love if he could get Grant Gustin on, because that would just be, I think, a very fascinating interview if he were able to get Grant on and not do the sort of car wash, Entertainment Weekly trade type of interview, but one that's more in depth.
So that Grant can explain why he's phoning it in the Flash, on the Flash. And so Grant can respond to the recent complaints about why Barry doesn't recognize that Iris is not Iris.
Yeah.
Barry's getting slammed right now.
It's like, dude, I know you went through a lot in Crisis, but you would think you would be able to tell who your wife is, and especially when she could cook. I should have been ding ding ding.
It's really, this episode. It was funny because I saw a lot of the tweets going on about like, really, Barry, you can't tell the difference yet. You can't. What's the matter? I before I actually watched the episode, so watching the episode, it was like a heightened version where I was constantly looking for the openings, and then we had Joe, who is clearly picking up on some bad vibes.
Right.
It just astounds me how long this whole storyline has continued. It's getting to the point of exhaustion for me, where I'm just like, okay, yeah, we didn't even see Iris on the other side of the mirror this episode, did we?
We did not. It was all McCulloch.
Yeah.
Eve. Yeah, it's all Eve. So, and the thing to me that's the big plot hole, and which they haven't really addressed, is why. So Cecile can read and sense everybody else's emotions, and thoughts, etc., and yet she hasn't been able to do the same with Iris.
Because Cecile is a MacGuffin.
Yeah.
They utilize Cecile and her abilities when it allows them to do something. She then becomes stagnant and unuseful, and therefore not a part of the storyline when they have no purpose. Because it was funny to see Cecile like front and center in this episode, especially when she brings out like the steak and the Ouija board and is like fully involved, and I'm just like, where have you been? I know you've been around, but where have you been again?
Yeah. I mean, I know that they changed the character. She's no longer in the DA's office, and now she's in a private practice. And I think she was doing defense work for Meadows, and then I guess she was still around the Central City News. You're right. I mean, it's one of those things where when you have such an expansive cast, characters do become MacGuffins, and she was a big one this week, along with Sunshine.
Yeah.
Which again, really fresh. It was like, okay, it was. I think that was one of. I will say I enjoyed this week's episode. So let me just put that out there. I thought it was. I do think, given that we've had pre-crisis, post-crisis, having instead of one big season-long arc of a big bad, it has helped the story in the sense that things are moving a little bit faster as far as certain elements being developed. But at the same time, you are correct in that whenever they do try to shove so many things into an episode, things do seem to linger a little bit longer than they should.
Right.
So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because this episode, half of it or 60% of it, I really enjoyed everything with Nash and Thawne. And it bothered me, though, that I think it took 10 to 15 minutes into the episode before we even saw Nash slash Thawne. Like there was this very long opening to set up the prismatic reflector and to explain what happened to Cisco's girlfriend and how that all is working out, and to the Sunshine storyline. And I'm like, this is the exorcism of Nash. So
Right.
so where what are we doing here? And then when they got to it, I really liked all of the talk about the negative tachyons and the positive ones, and that just reinforces this idea of good and evil and of the differences between Barry and Eobard. So all of that was fascinating. It was fascinating to understand more about Nash and his
Mm-hmm.
grief.
Yeah.
And then it just got elevated when Thawne and Barry were going at it, because you continue. We started with a kid who was watched his mother be taken from him,
Mm-hmm.
and then but where we are right now with Barry, it's really reinforced by he's also a man who lost his daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was all beautiful. However, it did not help to be in this like weird state of, here's a really good storyline and it's very Flash like at its best, and then
Mm-hmm.
but we have to go and spend time over here to further the overarching storyline that very few people are invested in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's that's so true, because I've been, because I think even whenever we, I was thinking back to one of our conversations on Flash. I think it was either last week or week before. Oh, last week actually, with Cisco's girlfriend being taken by Eve into the mirror universe. We didn't even mention it because the story, like you said, with Nash, and really how tragic a character Nash is this season. I mean,
Yeah.
because I was like, as I was watching the episode, okay, we get introduced to him early, in 6A, and then we get into Crisis, where in his quest to like find, I guess, peace and everything with what happened, we learned why he is motivated to do these things. In this episode, he unleashes the Anti-Monitor and becomes Pariah. He has, and after this, after all the events in Crisis, he is dealing with the consequences of that. And then on top of it, he has now become the reservoir for all the Waleses in the multiverse. And we learned that he had lost his daughter. So it's just, yeah, I mean, he's a very tragic figure. And you're right. I wish they did a good job mining that and really connecting those elements on an emotional level. Kudos to Tom Cavanaugh, who always brings it. But you're right, it did get sidetracked with all the other pieces of having to deal with this Sunshine storyline, which was again just a MacGuffin to like get Eve the device for the black hole crime syndicate. So it's just sort of like, okay, yeah. But yeah, the scenes with Barry and Thawne, and just that, how Thawne was just trying to get Barry to over just those cutting words as far as with Nora. I mean, especially when you're juxtaposed with what we're learning about Nash and his loss of his child, and you're right. Those are the things that Flash does very well.
Yeah. They do that very well, and it's just it's frustrating for me because last week I was bored out of my mind with the episode, and this week I got invested, but I still saw glaring problems and like Caitlin getting hurt.
Yeah.
But it was just like, did they just want to like come up with a clear reason as why she wouldn't be involved in the rest of the episode? It's just like these weird little things where you can see the writing that continues to irritate me. But lastly, I really liked how, because it's very important for them to recognize this, and I'm glad they had dialogue about it, that Thawne isn't gone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that allows him to be put on the shelf, but knowing that if he comes back, well, we already established he's not completely gone. So he's just looking for a body.
Yeah, yeah. So
probably
either
like Tom Cavanaugh.
Yep, bring Tom Cavanaugh back again, or maybe Matt Letscher if he's available. But yeah, I did like that piece of the story too, because and I'm glad they actually wrapped up the Thawne story this way. They didn't let it linger out too long, and it was a good use of Thawne. And now we can, whenever we get back April 7th, and hopefully they can get back, finish out the season in relative order. We can really get more invested in this Eve story, because it does have potential. I will say, I did like where it was going at the beginning, but we had the Ralph and Sue piece to it, and so there's clearly the supporting characters are all connected to it, but it's just getting kind of fresh. It's just getting kind of like, okay, come on, Barry, figure it out so we can get Iris.
Well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Barry's not connected in a way. Like, a lot of people around him are doing the investigations, are picking up on the clues, and are being affected by this. But Barry himself has been very distracted with Crisis, post-Crisis, and now with Thawne. And that is something that Thawne is the biggest distraction for Barry. And Barry's also on the verge of losing the very thing that he has defined himself as, being a meta, being able to save people and help people.
Yeah.
So everything, it's both understandable that they're coming up with good reasons for Barry not being like, oh, we have this brewing problem. But at the same time, the show is called The Flash. Barry's our main character. They haven't made it clear, other than locking Iris away, why this is his villain right now, why this is the overarching big bad, what he's really doing to it. And of course, as I'm saying this, as soon as he gets reunited with Iris, he's going to be on like a revenge mode. But it's still there's still something lacking. I'll say that there's something lacking. But this was definitely not the only show that aired this week.
No.
Oh, man. So moving on to Batwoman, where we got to a very creepy flashback episode. It's not my favorite episode of the season by a long shot. I also I'm mixed about this episode.
I hear you.
Yeah, there was something that felt very, there was a lot of information, and there was a weird twist, and I'm glad at where we ended. Okay, I'll say that. I like the ending.
Okay. To
get there, for whatever reason, I wasn't 100% like, oh, cool, fascinating. I wasn't like engaged as I normally am, especially with this show.
Yeah. I felt that way this week too, and I don't know if it's because I was just tired or just, or if it was just, it did have that feel of like, it was a lot going on, but it wasn't going on. And I mean, it recognized the bigger Bat universe, because bringing in Scarecrow and Crane's fear toxin as a way that they use Mouse to, capture Alice and to use that, get the fear toxin to show her that. And I will say it did finally give some context for why Alice is the way that she is.
Yeah, it added another layer to the horrors that she encountered under Cartwright and with Cartwright.
Right,
and
right.
Especially as they tie it back into a woman who I can only assume is named Martha. Just saying.
Yeah, they just Mabel, but anyway.
Anyway, but at the same, and I like how you see the flashbacks, so you get sympathy, and then you're also viewing the world through a fear intoxicated Alice, and how Cartwright manipulation and strings continue to be pulled, especially when and then you have this weird encounter, or this not weird, but this cool encounter between who's their father name? What's their father name?
As far as which father, Kate's or?
Yeah, Kate.
Oh, Jacob. Kane.
So so between the Kanes and the Cartwright.
Yeah.
and it's just, and then the revelation that he killed Beth, and I think that's my issue. Viewers knows who killed Beth.
Right.
So as they're making these revelations to us, it's not really a revelation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, that was that was one of the threads that kind of like, okay. Yeah, I didn't follow through with that, but, and also, whenever Kate was explaining to her dad about Beth, that wasn't Alice that was murdered. That was actually Beth, and trying to explain the multiverse as far as how that all worked. And so that was just, I was like, okay, it needed to be done, but again, it was just like, I just felt like there was just a lot of stuff being thrown at the dartboard, and it was just kind of hard for me to sort of focus A to B to C to get to that point at the end of the episode where we had the conclusion of Cartwright's story.
Right, which puts Kate in a very precarious place, and that's why I like where it ended. I like where it wasn't a waste of an episode, because it clearly sets up a bigger issue for Kate, and it continues the story and this dynamic with the Kane family specifically. I mean, they're all in it together now, and they got to bury this body, and I really like that place, because there were a few episodes ago I never thought we would see that, and so I'm glad we came here. At the same time, there was something that just didn't work well and wasn't conducive with all the different things that they were trying to explain, like having all of these flashbacks on top of having Alice go stir crazy with the fear toxin, on top of Kate and her father encountering the man who took Beth away from them, twice, technically.
Yeah.
So it's just all of this stuff where it probably, if they had not shown who killed Beth in that previous episode, I probably would have been more on board with this episode, because that would have been a better revelation to realize that it was Cartwright. Yeah. Or they could have reduced the fear toxin, what is it, delusions that Alice, and focus more on the Kate and her father coming to terms and the moral quandary that they face, especially since where it leaves, and ultimately Kate does kill Cartwright, and she really separates herself from Batman in this episode, which we've been talking about the similarities and how they're manipulating the lore in all the right ways to make it familiar yet different. And then it's like they just drove off the cliff with this ending moment.
Yeah, but at the same time preserving the Bat legacy of that when they're in the suit they don't kill, which I'm glad which I'm so glad that they did that, and just in the way they've been building this arc with Kate and Alice throughout the season, it definitely, you know, it built to this point, and as far as also the moral questions of what it is to be a vigilante and that line between being a vigilante and a criminal. And so all the things that we've had up to this point, as far as Kate, like, I'm not like you, Alice, and stuff, and then at the end it's just like, actually now you are. So I like it's really, you know, it's really brought that moral ambiguity to the story, and really, and now we you know, since Cartwright himself is off the playing field, Mabel seems to be the real big villain here. How Kate and Alice will be working together, especially now that they know who was sort of pulling the puppet strings all this time to create Alice. And yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a very fascinating way to see how this sort of ends up, because now it's definitely shades of gray for both these two characters.
Yeah. No, I like it, and again, not my favorite episode.
I mean, it was like
does a lot for the characters and the narrative moving forward.
Yeah, 40 minutes of just like, okay, where am I at? And then like the last 10 to 15 minutes, I'm like locked in.
Which is a perfect segue into Supergirl.
Yeah. Yes. Again, yes.
Oh, Supergirl. This is a better episode than the previous week.
It was.
And you start.
Yeah. So it was a better episode, but I was disappointed because I was led to believe that this was going to be a Mia episode, a Nia episode, and it was. But I was wanting more. I just felt like it was kind of shoehorned into this thing with Alex and John and this, you know, the VR stuff, and it just, I don't know, it just didn't seem to sit well with me trying to put these two stories together, because the Nia storyline really, where the show does excel, is, you know, taking topical issues such as the underreporting of, you know, crimes against trans people, and really telling that story very well as far as Nia and her roommate. And then we had this Alex story, which, I mean, Alex and John just seem so detached and removed from Kara and everything else that's going on. It's just sort of like, it just seemed tonally like it was just too much. It wasn't a good sync up of storylines for the week for me.
Yeah, I was the same way, where it bothered me, especially since last week you mentioned being excited for Dreamer. This didn't really feel like a Dreamer episode. There were parts of it, but I also felt like the parts of it was a bit, and I'm trying to say this without being insensitive, it felt a bit heavy-handed, and almost where I felt the same conversations happened 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't escalate. It was just the same pointing out the same things and bringing up the same injustices again and again. And in a way where I felt like they just took the dialogue from the first scene, copied and pasted to the last scene. And I'm like, okay, guys, like, add some more textures, add some more layers. Like this, I understand why, because at the end of the day, messages that are really simple are often heard more than complex messages. Mm-hmm. And I did like a few scenes, especially between Nia and Kara, where they have a tendency to either make Kara really observant and fully understands all these situations, or really ignorant.
Yes, and I love that they had call her out on that. It was I did as and rightfully so.
Rightfully so, but it also bothers me because I'm like, Kara, wake up. And this is not the first time when this has happened, where I'm just like, it's really hard to follow a lead of a show when they keep doing these, like, being really ignorant about anything that isn't alien related.
Yeah, well, that was we talked about that last season with all the things, the xenophobia and everything that was going on, and it's carried forward again. And at this juncture of the show, Kara as a character should not be still this naive.
Exactly. And it stuck out like a sore thumb in this episode, particularly. Meanwhile, the Alex stuff, it's a toss up for me whether I like it or I don't like it, because I like that she's removed from the DEO and we're seeing her try to assimilate into society. And we understand why this is leading to her, us seeing her finally in a Kryptonian suit, and where this is all going. The virtual reality stuff that is fully, Alex is finding herself fully emerged into, is another aspect where I'm not fully on board with it. And maybe that's because right now what we're going through in the world, virtual reality, sounds really nice.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think it's very similar to what we're talking about with Barry. Mm-hmm. Kara is somewhat connected, but she's very distracted by Lana and by Lex.
Yeah.
And by Lana, I didn't mean Lena and Lex. I meant Lena and Lex. And so it's hard to get on to the Leviathan storyline when it's not being driven by Kara.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a very fair point. That's a very fair point. And I think that's why it's sort of like it doesn't resonate with me as much, given, and I love Alex as a character and stuff. So, and I like how she is still, the way that they use this episode, especially whenever she was in that VR world, and she was trying to figure out how to use her tech, and she's used to things working whenever it's supposed to, and coming to grips with that. It definitely so it does give some new texture to her, but again, like I agree with you as far as the stories itself. It just seems, and maybe you're right. It's just the times that we're in now. It's just sort of like, okay, I can do some escapism a little bit, but at the same time, it's just like, make it. And obviously, this was written weeks before all this is going on, but it just, it's just kind of hard to get fully invested in it.
Yeah. Creepy ending scene. Very creepy ending scene. Yeah. And a part of me did like that Jeremiah died. see, again, for some reason, Alex and Kara, they often have some episodes where it's about them being children and growing up the way they did and their parents, and then other episodes not so much. So I feel like it's been a long time since we've heard that name, Jeremiah.
Yeah.
My opinion. So part of me was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I was like, okay. I was like, all right, they're writing Dean Cain off since he's for his real world beliefs or whatever. I don't know, but it just kind of did seem it did kind of come out of left field with that with his passing.
Yeah. All right. And the moment that Will always waits for whenever we get a chance to talk right now, Picard.
This show felt like talk therapy.
Picard. I'm going to say it like that from now on. Picard.
JL. Yeah. But it did. I just felt like this was it was truly a bottle show after last week. And I mean, it was okay. I have to admit, it was an okay episode. I was trying to write a few notes about tonight's episode for our recording tonight. I was like I said, the first thing that kind of stood out with me was like it just felt like it was a lot of talk.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of talk, a lot of exposition, and
a lot of quote unquote revelations. Not really, but hey, we need to do something for an hour.
Yeah. We are on a limited budget, so we're gonna just keep it simple as far as the sets.
I just want to call it out right now. The Rios story aspect of this episode. The moment he sees Soji, I'm like, you no. You will not tell me. This is my thought process, Will. You will not tell me that out of all the pilots in this universe, Picard just so happens to get in touch with someone who knew Soji's mom.
Yeah.
You're not, because there's a lot of emphasis placed on Data being the father, and I'm constantly like, who's the mother? The mother? And it's just something where that moment, and then it takes forever to get there, but we finally get the history. And I'll be honest, I didn't understand half of really what Rios was talking about. But I did see the picture, and when you see the picture, you're like, oh, okay, so he encountered another clone. I don't know why we had to spend 40 minutes to get there, because Rios was already part of the mission, but okay.
Yeah, it just, it really, I felt the same way. I mean, it was like, okay, so we knew that he was Starfleet, and we see the photo and the drawing of it was a butterfly flower and beautiful flower, and what was the jhana, and so it was. I mean, it was fun. It was fun seeing Rafi do the detective work, talking to all the various holograms on the ship to sort of piece together the deal with Rios, and then we do get the connections as far as Picard and Rios in the past, because I guess it was one of Picard's academy classmates who introduced him to Rios as captain, and so there were like those bits and pieces that did tie them together. So, to your point, of all, in this great grand galaxy, the stars aligned to bring these two people together.
Yeah. So in a way, the actress who plays Ralphie saved this episode. Her acting with all of the variations and sides of Rios really kept momentum. Her investigation. The problem I found is she was investigating two different things. or two things that she knew was connected, but sometimes it got hard to follow because there were essentially two investigations happening. The one about Rios and what his connection with Soji is, and then the one about her theory on the where the Tel Shari and their beliefs stem from, and where the and how this all happened, and what happened on Mars, and how it's all connected. So it got kind of overwhelming, and just to a point where like, okay, let's get there. Let's get there already.
Yeah.
We're on our 5th version of him.
Yeah. It did, but you're right. I mean, she did help carry the narrative forward very, very well. One of the things I did like about the episode, though, is Seven and Elnor. It was just, so when we last saw Elnor, he was on the cube. Narissa was hunting him down as far as after she's killed Hugh, and he was in the control room and stuff, and so it was pretty cool to see Seven go full Borg for the purpose of trying to save the folks on the other Borg on the cube, because the Romulans were just like, okay, we're obviously trying to kill, open airlocks and just send them all out into space so they could use the cube for their purposes. Mm-hmm. So that was, seeing Seven do that, and just the fight scenes and stuff. I mean, those were pretty exciting elements of the episode, and then also just from the very beginning, even though it was a lot of exposition just to set up the story 14 years prior with Commander, we learned about Commander O being half Romulan, half Vulcan, which explains the mind meld she did with Agnes. It was not only it gave it context as far as all the images that she shared with her to turn her over to the side of like trying to obviously help Picard find Maddox, but then ultimately kill Maddox, and then getting to Picard himself. I thought it was pretty reckless of him to like have Soji and Agnes there together after what all she has done to this point. So
first of all, when they dropped that bit about Commander O, I immediately thought of you, because I remember you referring to like, who is she? What is she?
Yeah.
Now, Soji and Agnes, I actually argue, is one of probably my favorite aspects of this episode.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't say I didn't like it. I just thought it was just very reckless of Picard.
Yeah, but you also went on and on about the cube, and I was kind of like, about the cube.
Yeah.
Because with Agnes, I didn't, for whatever reason, up until that confrontation with Soji, I didn't really see her as a three-dimensional character. Like, she gets brought on board, the naive woman who's spent her life in research, adventure. We've seen that before. Mm-hmm. And then we find out she's a mole. And now you realize why they decided to go with her as being the mole, when she's both worked her entire life to see a creation like Soji. And right. When Commander O tainted that entire belief of evolution and creation, and in a way that now it's like, you're beautiful and I'm fascinated by you, but I'm terrified by you too. And there's something very I think the actress is Alison Pill. There was something in her eyes that she just captivated me throughout that entire encounter with Soji towards the end, because it felt heartbreaking, like a mother who sees her child and then is both endeared by her, but also horrified by what she would be able to do. And so to me, that was the episode. Those moments and those scenes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. That and it was a real nice way to build upon the Soji's interactions with Riker's daughter last week, with the philosophical question as far as, you know, are you human, are you synth, and so and building on the, you know, how, you know, Data's role in the universe, and you know, it was just a good way just to pull all the little threads that we've been building on this season. That moment with like, as you just beautifully put it, with Agnes was both horrified and also just in awe of what the culmination of what Soji represents, and also Dash.
Yeah, and I think that we're gonna get a little bit more of that specifically from Picard soon, because that's the whole crux of this whole season, is that the Tel Shari, they all believe that just because it happened 800 years ago, I guess, these synths are going to evolve to a point where they will just destroy everything and everyone. And so it's like a pendulum. It's a pendulum swing. So it's 50-50. Like,
yeah.
Picard had one good experience with the synth.
Right. Yeah,
and he's standing by that to the point where he could also introduce the end of the world, because Soji, technically, I guess she's kind of just assuming she's the destroyer. But that hasn't been proven.
Hasn't been proven, but I mean, but again, it did do a good job of pulling forward. Ram does, who is, you know, we've learned, and this is Narissa's aunt. They pull that the moment whenever they were playing the tarot card, the Romulan tarot cards or whatever, a few episodes earlier. It was, well, even though it spent a bit of time setting it up at the beginning of the episode, it was well executed to bring that forward, and for her to show and close that loop that she, in their eyes, is the destroyer.
Yeah, I really liked. See, I was not annoyed with the exposition at the beginning of this episode, because it tied in so many things that were referenced before, and then it added that connection between Narissa and Ramada, which honestly made me want to go back to that previous episode between Soji and her, where we did see the cards, and it would provide more context. Yep. And like, okay, now I understand, and I wonder if I could pick up on any hints. So overall, I'm actually, I really like this episode. It's solid, minus the Rios part and the just so like, hey, happenstance of it all. I like that preview of next week, where we're finally going to see where all of the synths have been coming from since they've been kind of kicked out of the universe.
Yeah. Definitely looking forward to this week's episode. Definitely.
All right. Well, I think that is it for us tonight. Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK. Be sure to social distance, y'all. It's up to all of us to keep this thing from spreading.
Yep, absolutely. And you can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at CNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. But most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, and wherever you get your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.